If you look at the geopolitical map of the Middle East today, it seems like Iran and Israel have been locked in a deadly match since the dawn of time. We constantly see news of drones striking in the night, secret cyber assassinations, and angry politicians threatening total annihilation. It feels permanent, like a law of physics. But what if I told you that less than 50 years ago, these two heavily armed nations were not just friends, but secret strategic partners? Yes, you heard that right. Imagine two modern sworn enemies sharing top-secret military intelligence and quietly building massive energy infrastructure together. They literally teamed up against the rest of the neighborhood. Our little penguin friend here certainly can't believe it. His mind is completely blown. To understand how we got from a golden friendship to today's explosive and highly dangerous shadow war, we have to travel back in time. Let's rewind the clock to the 1950s. Israel was a newly formed, fragile state, completely surrounded by a ring of hostile Arab nations. These neighboring countries made no secret of their intentions. They essentially wanted to wipe the new Israeli state entirely off the regional map. Facing this existential threat, Israel's very first prime minister, the pragmatic David Ben-Gurion, realized he desperately needed a master plan for survival. He formulated a brilliant geopolitical strategy and called it the Periphery Doctrine. The core idea was actually incredibly simple but highly effective. Ben-Gurion's logic was this: if your immediate neighbors hate you and want you gone, you must make friends with the people who live directly behind your neighbors. You essentially leapfrog over the immediate threat to find allies on the outer edges. It was a classic, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, strategy. So, Israel looked across the map. And who was the biggest, wealthiest, and most powerful non-Arab nation sitting right in that peripheral region? The answer was the imperial state of Iran. At the time, it was a rapidly modernizing powerhouse ruled by an ambitious monarch, the Shah. This realization set the stage for one of the most unlikely, highly classified, and impactful alliances the modern Middle East has ever seen. The Shah of Iran, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, was a cold-blooded pragmatist. He didn't particularly love Israel, but he loved the idea of Arab nationalism even less. And he loved money even more. Israel needed oil to survive in a hostile region. Iran, on the other hand, had literal oceans of it. It was the perfect match for a secret business arrangement. In total secrecy, they built the Eilat-Ashkelon pipeline. Iranian oil tankers would quietly drop off crude oil in Israel, which was then piped to the Mediterranean. They weren't just neighbors, they were practically high-stakes business partners. Europe got its energy, Iran got its cash, and Israel got its lifeline. But the alliance went much deeper than just oil. Intelligence agencies, the Israeli Mossad and the Iranian SAVAK, worked hand in hand. They even launched a top-secret military initiative with a deceptively beautiful name, Project Flower. But this was no garden party. Behind the name was a multi-billion-dollar project to jointly develop advanced ballistic missiles. The deal was simple. Iran provided the massive funding, over $1 billion in oil money, and Israel provided the cutting-edge military technology. It was a Middle Eastern bromance hidden behind closed doors. They were the region's ultimate power couple, making the neighbors very, very nervous. Israeli engineers were regularly spotted in Iranian labs, and Iranian officials were frequent guests at Israeli military bases. It was total cooperation. They shared the most sensitive secrets imaginable. This wasn't just an alliance, it was a deep, structural foundation for a new Middle East. To an outside observer in 1978, it looked like this alliance would last forever. It was a pillar of regional stability. But history is incredibly fragile. In early 1979, the ground beneath this billion-dollar alliance didn't just shift, it completely shattered into a million pieces. The Iranian Revolution was about to sweep everything away, turning the Middle East's most powerful friends into its most bitter enemies. The golden era was over, the shadow war was about to begin, and the first casualty, the friendship that once seemed unbreakable. The year is 1979. The streets of Tehran are flooded with millions of protesters. The new Islamic Republic establishes itself, and overnight, the geopolitical map flips. The new regime built its entire identity on fierce anti-imperialism. The United States was branded the Great Satan, and Israel became the Little Satan. All diplomatic and economic ties were instantly severed. The former Israeli embassy in Tehran was literally handed over to the Palestinian Liberation Organization. The joint ballistic missile projects cancelled. The secret oil pipeline completely shut down and sealed off. The billion-dollar bromance was officially dead. For the new Iranian leadership, opposing Israel wasn't just a convenient political stance, it was woven into their core religious and ideological duty. Our penguin friend is now wearing a hard hat, hiding in a bunker, because things are about to get messy. But here comes the plot twist. Despite the public hatred, burning flags, and fierce rhetoric, the secret back-channel deals weren't entirely dead. In 1980, Saddam Hussein's Iraq brutally invaded Iran. This sparked one of the deadliest wars of the 20th century. Iran was desperate for weapons to defend itself. Their military was equipped with American gear. But the US had slapped them with a massive embargo. So, who do you secretly call when you need spare parts for F-4 Phantom fighter jets? Ironically, you call the Little Satan. Throughout the early 1980s, Israel secretly sold hundreds of millions of dollars worth of weapons and ammunition to Iran. Wait, why would Israel arm its sworn enemy? Simple, cold geopolitics. Israel feared the aggressive, expansionist Saddam Hussein much more than the new Iranian regime. It was the ultimate display of pragmatic hypocrisy. The enemy of my enemy is my customer. Even our penguin is taking notes on this ruthless capitalism. But this bizarre arms-dealing relationship couldn't last forever. Once the grueling Iran-Iraq war finally ended in 1988, Saddam Hussein's military was severely weakened and distracted. Meanwhile, Iran emerged from the ashes not defeated, but as a rising regional power. They now possessed a massive, battle-hardened military and relentless revolutionary zeal. Israel suddenly looked at the map and realized a terrifying truth. They had helped feed a tiger that was now turning its hungry eyes toward Jerusalem. Fighting a direct conventional war is incredibly expensive, and if you look closely at the map, Israel and Iran don't even share a physical border. To reach each other, they would have to cross hundreds of miles. So, Iran perfected a completely different, highly effective strategy, the proxy war. Why shed your own blood when you can fund someone else to fight for you? To manage this massive operation, Iran heavily relied on the Quds Force. This elite branch of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps had one primary mission: export the revolution and build a vast network of loyal, armed militias. They desperately needed a testing ground. In the early 1980s, they found the perfect chaotic environment just north of Israel, the war-torn nation of Lebanon. Tehran poured millions of dollars, intense military training, and fierce ideological fervor directly into the marginalized communities of southern Lebanon. Out of this massive and calculated investment, the absolute crown jewel of Iran's proxy network was born. They called it Hezbollah, or the Party of God. Hezbollah quickly grew from a scrappy, disorganized militant group into a heavily armed, highly disciplined fighting force, parked right on Israel's northern doorstep. Our penguin is measuring the distance. It's uncomfortably close. Israel was now facing a massive Iranian-backed army without a single Iranian soldier physically in sight. This completely changed the rules of the geopolitical game. The shadow war evolved into a deadly, unacknowledged dance of covert smuggling and precision airstrikes. Here is how it worked. Iran would secretly smuggle advanced rockets and missile parts through complex routes in Syria, carefully hidden inside civilian-looking convoys. Israeli intelligence, the Mossad, would relentlessly track these shipments. In the dead of night, Israeli fighter jets would bomb the convoys before they ever reached Lebanon. The dark beauty of a shadow war is plausible deniability. Iran says, "We didn't launch those rockets." Israel says, "We didn't bomb that warehouse." Both sides bleed. Both sides take losses, but neither officially declares war. This delicate balance kept the conflict from boiling over into a full-scale regional Armageddon. But as the 21st century dawned, the proxy battles in the physical dirt were about to be overshadowed by a terrifying new, completely invisible battlefield. By the mid-2000s, Israel faced a terrifying new nightmare: Iran's rapidly advancing nuclear program. If Tehran acquired the bomb, the rules would change forever. A nuclear-armed Iran would turn the proxy war into an existential threat. Israel felt it was staring directly down the barrel of total annihilation. But there was a massive problem. Iran had cleverly built its nuclear enrichment facilities deep underground, buried beneath thick layers of solid rock and concrete. Traditional airstrikes would be incredibly difficult, and bombing an Iranian nuclear facility could easily trigger a massive regional war, or even World War III. So, the intelligence agencies of Israel and the United States, the Mossad and the CIA, had to get creative. They needed an entirely new weapon. In 2010, the world was quietly introduced to a completely invisible assassin. It wasn't a bomb, a bullet, or a highly trained secret agent. It was a tiny, incredibly sophisticated piece of malicious computer code. This was Stuxnet, the world's very first true, physical damage-causing digital weapon. Stuxnet wasn't designed to steal data or crash your email. It was precision-engineered with one single, highly classified mission: infiltrate the Natanz nuclear facility. The facility was air-gapped, meaning it wasn't even connected to the internet. Someone had to physically plug an infected USB drive into the system. Once inside, Stuxnet was incredibly polite. It ignored everything else and silently hunted for specific Siemens programmable logic controllers, the brains of the nuclear centrifuges. These centrifuges spin at supersonic speeds to enrich uranium. Stuxnet secretly rewrote their code, commanding them to spin wildly out of control until they shattered. But here is the truly evil genius part. While the centrifuges were physically tearing themselves apart, Stuxnet played a recorded loop to the scientists' monitors. The screens showed that everything was running perfectly normally. The Iranian engineers were completely baffled as their multi-million-dollar equipment mysteriously self-destructed. Boom. Without firing a single physical shot, Israel and the US successfully sabotaged the facility and set Iran's nuclear program back by several years. It was a stunning tactical victory, but it also opened Pandora's box. The shadow war had officially escalated into the terrifying realm of cyber warfare. But digital code simply wasn't enough to permanently stop the nuclear program. The shadow war soon violently spilled back out of the cyberspace matrix and poured directly onto the bustling physical streets of Tehran, manifesting in the most brutal, highly targeted, and terrifying way imaginable. Between 2010 and 2020, Iran's top nuclear scientists began mysteriously losing their lives in elaborate scenes ripped straight out of a Hollywood spy thriller. The signature tactic was shockingly bold. Shadowy assassins on fast motorcycles would pull up to a scientist's moving car in heavy city traffic, slap a high-explosive magnetic bomb directly onto the car door, and speed away into the maze of streets just seconds before a massive detonation. Our paranoid penguin friend is now wearing a heavy-duty bomb disposal suit just to safely cross the street. The atmosphere in Tehran was intensely fearful. The absolute climax of this physical campaign occurred in 2020 with the targeted assassination of Iran's top nuclear mastermind, a man named Mohsen Fakhrizadeh. This wasn't a standard drive-by shooting. He was reportedly eliminated using a highly advanced, satellite-controlled, AI-assisted machine gun mounted remotely on a pickup truck. The Israeli Mossad never officially confirms or denies these cinematic operations, strictly maintaining their classic doctrine of plausible deniability. But the bloody message was crystal clear. The message was simple: no matter how deep you hide, no one is safe. However, Iran is far from a passive victim in this dynamic. Tehran aggressively hit back, rapidly expanding the battlefield. They launched severe retaliatory cyber attacks aiming to disrupt and poison Israeli civilian water infrastructure. They also heavily activated the global proxy and intelligence network, attempting to target Israeli diplomats and even ordinary tourists vacationing in foreign countries. The unwritten, unspoken rules of engagement that had carefully governed this covert conflict for decades were rapidly mutating into something completely unpredictable and highly volatile. The carefully maintained shadows of the 1980s and 90s were permanently disappearing. Both sides were becoming increasingly brazen, operating in the glaring, undeniable light of day. What originally started as a localized, highly classified feud was rapidly boiling over into a sprawling, multi-front regional war that threatened the entire global economy. And that brings us to the present day, the era of pure secrecy. The careful unwritten rules of the past 40 years is officially dead and buried. Iran's once secret proxy network has rapidly evolved into a massive, heavily armed, and openly declared regional alliance proudly known as the Axis of Resistance. This powerful network now stretches far beyond Lebanon, encompassing battle-hardened militias in Yemen, Iraq, and Syria, creating a massive ring of fire. Our penguin friend is frantically looking at the updated geopolitical map, dropping his clipboard as he realizes Israel is now virtually surrounded by hostile forces. In response, Israel launched what it calls the campaign between the wars. conducting thousands of covert and overt airstrikes across the entire Middle East. Israeli fighter jets openly target Iranian weapons depots, airbases, and supply lines, primarily in war-torn Syria, trying to disrupt the constant flow of advanced arms. But the red lines were truly shattered when Israel began openly targeting top Iranian commanders, even launching precision strikes against diplomatic compounds abroad. In the past, such high-value targets would be quietly eliminated in the shadows. Now, they were taken out with devastating missile strikes in broad daylight. Tehran's reaction to this escalation was completely unprecedented. For decades, Iran had strictly relied on its proxies to do the fighting and absorb retaliatory blows. But the old rules had evaporated. Iran decided it was finally time to step completely out of the shadows and strike the little Satan directly. In a historic and terrifying escalation, Iran launched a massive, synchronized wave of hundreds of suicide drones and ballistic missiles directly from its own territory. These weapons crossed the airspace of multiple sovereign nations, lighting up the night sky like a dystopian sci-fi movie, aimed directly at the heart of Israel. Israel's multi-layered air defense systems, including the famous Iron Dome, worked in absolute overdrive, intercepting the massive swarm in a spectacular, billion-dollar fireworks display. Our penguin is watching the sky with 3D glasses, completely terrified, realizing this isn't a movie, but a horrifying glimpse into a potential apocalyptic war. Most missiles were intercepted, but the psychological barrier was permanently broken. The two nations had finally exchanged direct, undeniable military blows for the very first time. Today, we stand on the precipice of a completely new, terrifying era in the Middle East. The old, unwritten rules of the Shadow War are gone. The entire world is holding its collective breath, deeply anxious about what this unmasked, direct conflict will inevitably bring next to the global stage. When you look back at the grand sweep of history, the sheer irony is almost impossible to believe. Our penguin is still flipping through old photos. How did two nations that once jointly built massive pipelines and shared top-secret ballistic missile technology transform into each other's ultimate nightmare? It proves that in the ruthless, cold-blooded game of global geopolitics, alliances built on pure convenience and shared enemies are incredibly fragile and temporary. The pragmatic leaders who originally built that golden era are long gone, completely replaced by fundamentally incompatible religious and political ideologies that cannot coexist. As the famous British statesman Lord Palmerston once noted, "We have no eternal allies. And we have no perpetual enemies. Our interests are eternal and perpetual." For both the Islamic Republic of Iran and the State of Israel, this shadow war is no longer just about regional influence or border disputes. It is now viewed by hardliners on both sides as a desperate, absolute matter of existential survival, a zero-sum game with no easy diplomatic off-ramp. And so, the conflict will likely continue to evolve, from proxy militias in the desert, to invisible cyber worms in the digital matrix. And now, to direct ballistic missile strikes lighting up the night sky. The geopolitical chessboard has been completely upended, and the stakes are higher than ever. Our little penguin friend is packing his emergency survival kit and getting out of here before the next unpredictable move is made on this dangerous board. Will these two, impossible friends, ever find common ground again? Or is the Middle East doomed to remain a perpetual, highly volatile battleground? History is full of these shocking twists. If you want to uncover more incredible, untold stories from the past, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Thanks for watching. Leave a comment on what conflict we should cover next. And remember, today's greatest ally might just be tomorrow's worst enemy.